G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't focus on the superstars. We focus on the lesser knowns and the guys that are going to bring you value in your Keeper Leagues. Usually right now I am joined by Kaes, but you may have heard on the socials that he has perforated his eardrum, so it's a bit painful for him to chuck a pair of headphones on and talk at the moment. So what we're going to do is I'm going to record the the first bit and the questions at the end, and Kaes is just going to join us for the round rewind. So we'll go through that now, and before we get stuck into the podcast, we'll just thank Remedy Kombucha for supplying us with a few drinks. I forgot to put some in the fridge for tonight, so they're just sitting nicely on the desk here. If you're watching the video or if you're listening, you can just imagine that they're sitting on the desk there, ready to drink. Hopefully the ones in the fridge cool down quite quickly. We can get stuck into those. Last Friday we held our Podcasters Keeper League draft. So we've posted the results for all the draft picks up on our website. So if you're keen to see how some of the podcasters drafted in a Keeper League, check that out. There was some interesting picks. There was some surprising picks. For example, Riley O'Brien was in our draft pool and he only went at pick 2. So Matt Rao went before him. So that was interesting from Cam there. Have a look and see how we drafted, rate our teams, send us some feedback, and would appreciate that. So check it out. We'll get on to the breaking news, I guess. So no big injuries or anything on the weekend, but Alex Sexton, he's done himself a hamstring, so it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. Apparently he's going to miss round 1, but we could see players like, 2-meter Peter, might be a bit more confirmed for round 1. I'm not sure how that will benefit us in Keeper Leagues or anything like that, but he's one that could come in. Another guy that's a bit injured at the moment, but that's Isaac Rankin, but if he's apparently ready for round 1, he could come in. Hopefully it confirms Connor Buderick actually starts in the side, because we know the fantasy talent that he actually could be. I know he's playing a bit of a different role to what he was in his junior days, he's still shown signs in the preseason, especially in the first half of the game against Geelong, so it'll be pretty handy if he gets a run, someone to target in your drafts as well. Scott Lycett, he came off in the third quarter, but he actually got injured in the second quarter. So his score looked pretty bad, but he was actually going all right and scoring okay until he actually got injured. So he should be fine for round 1, so we'll keep our fingers crossed there. If not, the obvious one is Laddams comes in and Westhoff does a brunt of the backup rucking. So that could be a possibility, but I think he'll be right for round 1. And then Taylor Adams, he came off with a bit of a sore hip, so that Collingwood midfield is a little bit depleted right now. There's talk of Sy coming in for him. I personally can't see that happening, considering he hasn't really featured that much in the preseason. But I think it confirms someone like Rupert Wills plays round 1 as well. So we know he's been a good points per minute scorer in the over the years, but he doesn't get enough time on ground to be a serious contender for fantasy. That said, if he gets enough time on the ground, you get 60, 65%, that type of thing, he can pump you out an 80, which can be handy for a last midfield spot, but wouldn't be holding my breath or wouldn't be relying on him for a fantasy spot there. So that is basically all of the news. So next up, Kaes will join us for the round rewind. We'll get that done, and then afterwards I'll answer some questions solo. So here comes the round rewind. Kaes, mate, nice of you to join us for the round rewind.
Thanks, mate. Off my deathbed today.
Yeah.
It's basically the podcaster's equivalent of, Dammit Brereton playing through punctured lungs and broken ribs and all that,
Yeah, basically, with the ear, and I guess it would hurt to talk as well at the same time. So
it's a very weird feeling, so I think I might have to hang the surfboard up and stop hanging 10 from now on.
Mate, you are too old for that shit. You're a balding 31-year-old, mate. You shouldn't be on a surfboard, right?
I need to know where my place is, to be sure. But, actually, funnily enough, a guy who also went down in the same wave a bit further on the beach got pulled out the ocean by 2 dudes and he snapped his thigh bone.
Okay, sounds like a pretty dangerous day.
So look, I got away pretty scot-free really, which is the story is. So
okay. Let's just stay away from the water, mate, and focus on the podcast, all right?
I'll stay in nice little Adelaide.
All right, let's have a talk about some games we saw on the weekend. So the first up is Adelaide versus Gold Coast. So I'd like to say I had a look at this one, but it started at, I think, 2:30 p.m. or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
I think it started at 4:15 or something like that. So it was really hard to get home in time to have a look. We also had our draft on Friday night, which I talked about earlier. But anyway, we get stuck in. The first player that stood out to me was Paul Seaman. So he had 110 from 78% time on ground, and he looked to carry over from last year. So at the end of last year, he was playing on a wing a lot more. It was him and Brodie Smith on opposing wings, just racking it up at the end of the season. The Crows obviously wanting to use the ball, move the ball a bit quicker. So yeah, he only averaged 72 last year. So that means we could see him slide a little bit in drafts. I think he might be available in our draft coming up on Friday, Kaes.
No.
He's not. He's been kept. Okay.
He's been kept.
Maybe it was a different draft I was looking at. I've been in 3 in the last fortnight. So
you're addicted, mate. You're addicted.
But yeah, we could see him getting up to those higher 80s, I think, this year if he keeps playing that wing role. Got an opinion, Kaes?
I do. I think that, Smith, Miller, those kind of guys, Seedsman, they're going to be important to how the Crows play this year. And I think we haven't seen as much with Jones and those kind of guys come on, and unfortunately in the Marsh series. So I think that, Nicks might be giving the mantle to someone like Seedsman to be that, creative, running, driving player. So wouldn't surprise me at all if he kind of pushes into those mid to 80s and becomes a handy, M4.
Yeah, as much as the Crows are talking about, or Crow supporters especially think they're going to play the kids, I think Nicks is definitely going to want to still win this year. So he's going to play the best side he possibly can. I think Seedsman is in that, and I think that's on the wing.
Definitely.
Rory Atkins, he also played on the wing, so he was on the opposing wing, and he scored really well last week. There was concerns, I thought, all pre-season, because I like the look of him getting defender status in Ultimate Footy, but there was concerns about Seedsman and Smith, being on the wings and kind of pushing him back into defence a bit more, where he doesn't score as well. But look, they both played on the weekend, and Brodie Smith played a lot more inside midfield as well, so in the actual centre circle, at the bounces and things like that. So he and then Smith also looked to be playing in defence as well. So the role, I guess, I thought Atkins plays. The difference is that Smith can actually score well from playing in defence as well. So. At the moment, it looks like he'll maintain his role on the wing, or at least he'll get a bit of a run there every now and then. And I reckon that makes him a reliable defender. What do you reckon?
Definitely. Look, I think him getting back status is a massive tick, and even if he doesn't really hit, mid to high 80s, it's not really as a concern with the back status. I think, like, if he just maintained that mid only, almost like Seedsman, him having back status going this year, it's like a free swing for all coaches. So I reckon he can be more than serviceable as a pretty handy defender for your team. So definitely one I'd be locking in if I could.
For sure. Speaking of defenders, next up is Bryce Gibbs. He scored 76 points playing defence, and he's another player you'll probably get cheap this year after the stinker he had last year. So look, not 100% sold yet. He's still best 22. Could spend a bit of time on the twos because there's still always that talk about the Crows wanting to play the kids. I think if he's performing at the right level, I think he will play. So, look, I think he should be best 22, and if that's the case, he should be a handy defender this year.
Yeah, I think he's going to start the season well. Otherwise, he's probably one of the first guys that's going to get chopped. So if you are an owner, I think you need him to kind of come out the gates firing. Otherwise, you might be left with a bit of a dud this year.
Yep, I agree. All right, Zach Smith. So he scored 103 points. He dominated O'Brien in the hit out, so he had 39 there. So that's a bit of a worry for O'Brien owners or guys looking at picking him up in the draft if he was left in your pool. But yeah, he had 70 last week as well. So he's averaged in the 80s before. I think in 2017 he averaged 85 around that. So look, Witts is going to have a slow start due to the foot surgery I think he had. They reckon he'll play round 1, but I reckon they might play the both of them to share the load. Look, he might be in line for some games early as well as solo ruck if Witts doesn't come up. But I don't see them, if Witts is fully fit, I don't see them actually playing 2 rucks. So I think he's a bit of a stopgap for the minute. So he's not probably one on my radar, but the score in the Marsh game was pretty impressive. I
think he's got to be a handcuff if you've got Witts. But someone like 2 metre Peters in that side who can pinch hit in the ruck for second ruck once Witts comes back. So someone you have to have, I think, as a Witts owner, especially with his slow start to the season.
Yep, definitely. Jack Lukosius, so he went head-to-head with Tom Lynch and gave him a bit of a bath as well, which was pretty nice. So Lynch did copy a head knock, but he played on. But look, Lukosius might be a viable option as a defender, I think. He takes intercept marks, which is, I guess, his forte, because he reads the ball really well, but he's also got immaculate foot skills, so they want the ball in his hands on the halfback. My worry is just when he will I think he will inevitably be a key forward at some stage. So I'm worried about his scoring drying up when that does happen, because we know that role is not friendly for fantasy. For the time being, though, I think he could be handy. What do you reckon?
It's interesting because I was looking back at the last year's prospectus, and his numbers in the underage competition were really, really good. Like, he was almost close to 100 average player. Now, I know that he was like a big dude in, playing against kids, and he's probably
kicking snags,
and but he's now jumped up that next level where there's much bigger guys around him, much more experience. But I think that he's got he's got some pedigree to him. So yes, I know you always get a bit worried about him going up forward, but I think if he can maintain playing in defence this year, I reckon that's going to be huge for his scoring ability. Even if he does go forward when the Suns improve, I still think he can be a key forward that can be like a mid-80 average. No worries.
My issue is not with him; it's the game itself. Like he's definitely going to be one of those Nick Riewoldt types. I think it's just whether he actually finds some space to take a mark and kick a goal and that sort of stuff in the modern game.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure, but he could be the player that's good enough to break that mold. Who knows?
He could be.
Jack Bowes, Kaes, I feel a bit dirty talking about him.
Talk about him, please.
83 points. I actually own him in one of our leagues. We own him in opposing leagues.
Yes.
All right, 83 points. Look, not great for a midfielder, Kaes, but the positive was he was playing across half back.
Yes.
So I think he's going to slip back into that role. He's shown that he's not an awesome footballer, so he's not good enough for the midfield, but they'll chuck him across half back, and I think he will become a DPP at some stage this season. So the Gold Coast midfield doesn't need him anyway.
So I might not need to draft any defenders in our Friday home
You know
league.
what we say, we don't bank on it, Kaes, but look, it's looking good. It's looking good at the moment.
That's the way it started. He's just ticking into it, don't worry. But look, 83 points as a mid, sure, it's not great, but he's one that could be a real smoky for that DPP.
For sure. Ben Ainsworth, the name that is on a lot of people's lips right now. So he had 77 points, but only played 55% time on ground. So he went at 1.1 points per minute in this game. So hopefully this score pushes him back under the radar because it's only a 77, but I think he's still going to have a fair few watchful eyes on him somehow. Look, I've got a really good feeling about him this year. I think he's going to go next level. What do you reckon?
Lids off the box. I'm a Ben Ainsworth owner. Love him. And this is exactly what I wanted to see when we're talking about him in our previews for this year. Like, we needed to see him be able to do this, whether he was going to be a quality or a quantity player. He's actually both. So bring on. I reckon he could be probably the top 5 forwards this year, no doubt.
Just a couple to look at to finish off. So Hugh Greenwood only had 66 this week, but the positive was he was still getting that midfield time. As a forward, I still think he's going to be great this year despite this low score. It's just Greenwood is the type of player that does have up and downs like this. He always has, and he'll go 66 one week and then 120 the week after and average around that 80 marks, 80 mark in there. So I reckon, look, the only issue is he'll probably lose forward status at some stage. So he'll be a forward for this year. If you've got him, he's probably a guy that you're going to want to sell high on at some stage this year if you can, because he might not be a forward going forward. And as a midfielder, I don't think he offers the same value. What do you think, Kaes?
His tackle numbers are just so good. So I think he's always going to have value on his side. Hopefully he still kind of sneaks forward for Gold Coast this year, because I think he might still kick 20 odd goals, and that might be enough to keep his forward status. But look, I think if you got him this year, definitely holding him because there's a bit of upside with the new club. So tackles well is going to be best 22 there, and I think he could be quite a handy player this year. And maybe just keep monitoring this year.
Before we move on to the Hawthorn versus Melbourne game, I guess Chase Jones was disappointing, as well. So I don't think he's as much of a lock to be a fantasy breakout this season as we thought.
Man, I was excited.
I flagged it because he just looks too tiny for a permanent midfield spot, and he struggles to get into the game at times. Look, I could be proven wrong still, but I just can't see it happening, not this year anyway. So
I see Chase Jones is in our draft on Friday.
Nah, not going near him.
We're not going near him.
No, I reckon he'll just play it forward this year, or he'll have stints on the wing but not get huge numbers. Yeah. And then I think he'll be probably full-time midfielder after that, which will, doesn't...
So you're talking 2021s?
Yeah, even then, I think...
The proper third-year breakout.
Even then, I don't think... He's going to take a while if he does come. I just can't see it happening. He just doesn't look like a fantasy footballer.
This is a big call early on in 2020.
I've already made it. I made it last year.
He's made the call, guys.
I just don't see it happening. Not anytime soon anyway. All right, let's move on to Hawthorn versus Melbourne.
Yes, so my boy, Harry Morrison, is he back is the big question. 89 points at 0.9 points per minute. Had 23 touches, 18 kicks, and provided a bit of run and dash for the Hawks on the weekend. Was it Friday even? I can't remember. It was a long weekend for me.
It was Friday. It was while we were drafting.
It was, yeah. So, look, played a bit in the wing, half-back, and look, we know that Blake Hardwick is injured. So is he the guy that kind of takes his spot? That would be the big question here. So, look, I think, I was super keen on him last year. He obviously didn't quite crack that Hawthorn side, had some issues there. But, it almost seems like they've been happy to put him back in this side this year. He's a proven scorer. Look, there is obviously some risk there still, but I think the signs are good. Like, I think him getting some good game time in the last Marsh Series game is a big tick for his 2020 aspirations.
Yeah, at this point, I think he's the one that replaces Hardwick going by last week. And there's another guy I'm more hopeful of fantasy-wise we're going to talk about next. But yeah, at the moment, I think he's the one that does replace Hardwick.
Yeah. Jack Scrimshaw would be that guy that you're talking about, Heifer. 72 points for him at 0.9 points per minute. Real rangy defender. Had 13 touches and 8 marks. So he's more of that, classic intercept kind of halfback bloke. So interesting to see what happens here. So he was picked 7 back in the day and then got moved on from Gold Coast or GWS, one of the two. But yeah, he should finally get a good crack at it this year. So he was in and around that team last year at Hawthorn. There's a bit of hype coming out about him in terms of what he can do. I think even the prospectus calls him the next Grant Birchall. So smooth mover, really, really good kick. So I think it's between him and Morrison as who kind of is that last spot in the back line. It might be both of them, but how they both go in terms of their scoring, I'm not too sure. But I think for me, if he's going to be available in a lot of pools, he could be a nice little, mid-draft pickup, I think. No risk really taking him there. And he could be one that could kind of push that, high 70, 80 average, no dramas, I think.
Yeah, no, look, I think the fantasy game, he's got a fantasy game, basically, this player. It's just opportunity and I guess staying fit is what's going to be his biggest challenge.
Been his issue.
Yeah. So hopefully he gets that opportunity soon because I reckon he will be a good pickup.
Yeah. The other thing we learnt basically from that game is that John Segler is the number 1 ruckman. So unless Clarko is punking us all and Ashton Kutcher's going to come out in round 1 and be like, nah, big boy's the bloody number 1 ruckman here, you got to have John Segler. Now, he's one that might actually be available in a few pools. So he was available on our Friday night keeper podcasters draft as a ruck forward. He's a super good option. So he had 92 points, 32 hitouts. So even if you aren't a big boy McAvoy owner, I think he's a good guy to get, not just to screw someone else in terms of their handcuff, but he's one that you could play either as your number 1 ruckman or as a forward option too. So make sure you get in here and steal him early. Like I'm talking first or second round here because he's got talent. He's still quite young. I think he could be the Rob of 2020.
Now, I did a startup keeper league draft last week, and it's with a bunch of blokes I go to the footy with. They're not super fantasy nuts, but they do watch a lot of footy. Guess where I took John Segler?
Your last pick.
No, not that late. I got him at pick 26.
That's damn good.
Intend to play him as a forward because I already have other rucks in line as well. So I've got him picked him up as my last forward, I guess. I guess not many other people in the league had that kind of thought. So I think he can easily be, the high 80s, low 90 average forward in your side. Kind of like what Rowan Marshall was last season. I think he could be the guy this year.
Yeah, his stats are really good. So I think if he's around, you got to take him because you're not only going to screw someone else over who's a McAvoy owner. He's also going to be very, very handy for your side playing forward.
I also picked up McAvoy too in that draft, but later on. Well, my thinking is, what if this experiment doesn't work, but McAvoy does get back status in the meantime as well? So then you got another guy who'll go back in the ruck and get around the 80 mark and back status. So as long as one of those guys is playing,
it's going to be very interesting this year at Hawthorn. Very interesting. On to Melbourne. So Steve May, he's back. So 97 points for him at 1 point per minute, and he's going to be available in heaps of drafts. So 21 touches, which included 18 kicks and 8 marks. So was obviously completely hampered by injury last year, wasn't fit at all, missed a heap of games, and I think he was pretty disappointed at how he kind of rocked up to Melbourne. So fit and firing. When he was at Gold Coast, he was a high 70 average player as a backman. He just does everything right, takes a lot of marks, kicks the ball pretty well, so he's always going to be kicking, marking, which is great. I think he's just going to be a very handy addition to any side, and I think you probably get him quite cheap as well because, there's that, key back stigma and he had such a stinker last year, but he's a much better player than what he suggested he was last year, and I think, as like a D4, D5, I think he could be a real steal in some drafts. Yeah,
a couple of years ago, he was a high 70s averaging defender, wasn't he? Yeah, so I think he can get back to that. He's definitely viable. He tended to take a lot of kickouts at Gold Coast anyway, so that kind of bumps his scoring up a little bit too, I think.
Yeah, so like with Hibbard doing that role on the weekend and Christian Salem out, so I don't know, I think Salem's probably going to be taking a few more, but
there's still always a spread though.
Yeah, there is. He's definitely one of the guys that could do it. So more than handy this year, and I think he's going to be undervalued quite a bit. Michael Hibbert, so had an absolute day out, but just don't think about it. 115 points, 25 touches and 13 marks. Now that sounds amazing, but I don't think Hibbert got anywhere near a ton last year and was absolutely stinky. So Christian Salem was out last week. It was Crook. He's going straight back in that side, and Hibbert keeps going back to that, whatever scrap kind of pile of Melbourne who plays.
He plays more of a lockdown type thing.
So he's not going to be that guy who's scoring those points. That's Christian Salem's role. Look, there's going to be a few more better options than him at the Ds. My boy Hef kind of got sucked into Hibbert last year when he was on the scrap heap and took him in the draft really, really early, which was all a laugh.
It was the third round.
Yeah, now that was a bad call. But look, he's getting past it. Don't get too sucked into that score. It's not going to happen each week.
Yep, learned my lesson. I was hoping he'd bounce back to the 2018 numbers last year. It didn't happen. So, look, I'm not going to go near him again unless it's like super late. He's actually pretty good cover to have because he does play quite a bit.
He plays most weeks.
Yeah, and he does have the potential to be a good fantasy scorer. It all depends on the role he actually gets, and it doesn't look like he's getting a fantasy-friendly one anytime soon.
I don't think so. And lastly, Adam Tomlinson. So it's probably highly unlikely that he's going to be around in many keeper drafts, but if he is around for some reason that, you don't keep too many, I think he needs to go early. So he was always threatening to do what he did on the weekend, but his game was absolutely huge on Friday. So 32 touches, 10 marks, I think it was 137 points. I'm quite keen on him this year. So even if you are starting up a new keeper league, I'd be kind of looking to take him in my side. Now, we do know that mids roll thick when you're starting up a keeper draft and you can kind of go a bit later on them. He's one that, might really sneak towards the back end of the draft, and I think he's awesome value to take in there because I think the role that he's going to play at Melbourne is much more fantasy friendly than what he was getting at GWS, and he's got all the tricks to be a good fantasy scorer. Yeah,
I think at GWS he was thrown around in a lot of different roles that didn't really suit him. I think at Melbourne he's just going to play pure wing, and that'll really suit his fantasy game. So we should see him as a pretty reasonable fantasy scorer this year.
Rightio, Hef, your beloved Port Adelaide versus the Bulldogs.
Yeah, had a look at this game on Saturday afternoon. A few players to talk about. I know there's one guy you're going to be pretty keen to talk about from the Dogs, but we'll wait till we get to that.
No, can we start with that?
Let's do it. Yeah, why not? So let's talk about. We'll start with the Dogs. How's that?
Yeah.
We'll go with Tim English to start with. All right.
Yep,
so look, he went huge.
Tell me about it.
But I want to give you. Don't get too excited because
it's too late.
Lycett was on 25 at quarter time, and so it was pretty much neck and neck. All right. Yeah. Then he's rolled his ankle real early in the second quarter, and he basically didn't jump for the rest of the game. So every time there was a ruck contest, Lycett would run and try to come across the line and just body him out. And English actually looked like a good tap ruckman because he was just jumping over the top of them because he could actually jump.
Oh, yeah.
So it just meant he absolutely dominated this game in the ruck. Basically English was just all over the top of Lycett before Lycett came off injured because it was so obvious he was cooked. Yeah. I think he had 25 in the first quarter and then 10 for the next quarter and a half and then came off. So it was that done. So I think they just precautionary. I think he will be back in. But yeah, look, Tim English did look good. I think the noticeable thing is he actually looked like sizable. Yep. He looked pretty thick. Yep. We saw that last week as well. So he actually looks like he's going to be able to hold his own a bit more. I just think pump the brakes a little bit on this score.
No, this is Tim English here, man.
And then he rucked against Westhoff for the rest of the game as well.
Who's a great ruckman too. So, chips in. Don't worry about Brodie Grundy. If you're talking number one picks in a startup, Tim English.
All right, let's talk about someone else because I'm sick of talking about Tim English. Bailey Williams, he was running out of defence. He had 90 points, 23 disposals for 73% efficiency. So, Kaes, do you think he's redeemed himself?
I hope he hasn't because I delisted him in my my keepers for this year. I don't know. Yes, I know he played with Eastonwood with the team on the weekend, but is he going to be that guy? I just don't know. Matt Suckling, did he play? I didn't watch the game, so it's probably bad. But I still just don't think he's going to fit into that best 22.
Interesting. Hayden Crozier didn't really feature with Bailey Williams on the side. Good luck there. Well, maybe he was to the wrong guy.
Yeah, probably. That's my luck. But what do you reckon though? Do you think he's done enough to hold his spot?
I reckon he'll play. I reckon he'll play early. Whether he'll produce these sort of numbers in AFL level, though, I don't have that much confidence in it.
Yeah, because when he was scoring well a couple of years ago, it was running through halfback and the wing. So I don't think he's going to get the opportunity on the wing now with guys like Bailey Smith, etc. But so he's going to have to play a lot more defence. That's good if you got him. I'm still interested in redrafting him in our league on Friday night. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't know. I don't know if you'd be going early on him. I think you'd be going mid-range on him just because there is some risk factor still.
Yeah, I think so too. Speaking about Bailey Smith, you just mentioned before, so we'll go on to him. He had 90 from 85% time on ground. Now, what's really encouraging about this is he's actually getting those time on ground numbers up. So last year he spent a lot of time on the bench and then a fair bit up forward. So he's actually getting more midfield minutes too. So I think this could be to Lipinski's detriment, who we'll talk about next. So I think one of those guys, well, I don't think it's going to be detrimental to Lipinski. I think it's just going to be hard for Lipinski to improve. Mm-hmm. That said, I think Lipinski took a pretty similar number of centre bounce attendances as well. Yeah. So he's definitely still getting that run in the midfield. So Bailey Smith and Lipinski, I'm just worried they're going to eat into his scoring a bit, but into each other's scoring a bit. But both of those guys looked really good. Just on Lipinski quickly, he was also solid. He had 74 points from 75% time on ground. So yeah.
I think I want both of them in my side, especially if you're starting up a new one. Like they're both mid forwards, so like I think they're just going to be super, super good for you to years to come, really.
For sure. Let's move on to some Port Adelaide players. So,
Justin, you could have done this without me, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know. I should have
just made me sit through this. My ears sore enough without listening to your Port dribble.
No, that's going to make it worse. Sorry, mate.
I need to take some more drugs.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good idea. Justin Westhoff will start off with. So he started forward this week. So stark contrast from the defender we thought he might be playing. The defender role he might be playing this season. He had 109 from 71% time on ground. He's another player you should be able to get cheap purely due to age. Mm-hmm. By all reports, I guess we've got a bit of a connection to Justin Westhoff and some of his friends, and talking to them, they reckon he might probably battle to get another contract next year. He's basically been told this is it. So something really special would have to happen, I think, this year for him to go on again next year. So look, for this fact, I guess you will be able to get him quite cheaply, because people want to be offloading him this season to ensure that they don't just have a delisting and lose him for nothing. So you're going to try to, I guess, either if you're going for a flag, you're going to try to snap this guy up because he can be a decent scorer, or if you're not pushing for a flag and you've got him, you want to be offloading him for the best price you can get. But look at the scoring in this game as well. So Scott Lycett did roll his ankle earlier, which affected him. So Westhoff did a lot more rucking than usual. So he had 17 hitouts, which boosted his numbers. So again, a player that you should be able to get cheap. He doesn't get injured. He runs all day, all that sort of stuff. So I have faith in Westhoff in keeper leagues, purely because you're going to get him, I guess, a guy of his scoring power for less of a cost, I think, as well. So that's the only reason I'm big on him in keeper leagues. What do you think, Kaes?
Centre forward, I think he's such a good get. Especially with how Porter's shaping up, like whether he actually plays, forward, or whether he plays back, or whether he just kind of is a genuine utility. I think he's always going to be serviceable. And yes, his age is bad, but
he doesn't play like an old bloke.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. So let's hope he plays his 22 games this year, which would take him up to 290. Yeah. Only 10 behind Kane, and then, he gets another contract. That would be fantastic.
Westhoff will always be a player that kind of gets a lot of loose touches, and everyone thinks that because he doesn't man up, but it's actually because he's just got such a huge tank that no one in a side can go with him.
He's one of the fittest guys you'll ever see.
Yeah. At the games, they flash up like the kilometres covered, and he's always the top by an absolute mile. If you chuck him in defence, you have to play a key defender on him because he's so tall, but none of those key defenders have the tank to go with him, and that's why he just racks them up.
Yeah. But seriously, if you can get him in a draft, take him. He's going to be a steal this year.
Sam Powell-Pepper, so he was listed as a forward this season. So he mostly played in the midfield in this game, though, and he had 93 from 77% time on ground. So that's probably the maximum you're going to get from Sam Powell-Pepper, those sort of scores. But as a forward, that's going to be fantastic, I think. So he could be picked up a little bit later in drafts, just on the back of only going at 75 average last year. So, have a think about that. If he is available, I don't know if he's available in our league, Kaes. I think as a forward, he's probably going to be kept in most. Yeah. But if you're drafting, he's going to be one of those players that's way down on the list because of that average last year. So keep your eye out for him. Could be a handy pickup.
Are we talking proper midfield time for him this year, or it's going to be that forward role, you reckon? What's your gut feel?
I think it's going to be a mixture between the two. It's just this game, it didn't happen. So, But you will get games like this where he does pump out decent scores that will pretty handy. I reckon he'll go around the 80 mark, and as a forward, you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
Carl Amon, he played on a wing, so he went undrafted in a lot of leagues last year, so he's a real big improver. He had 89 points in this game, and he'll be handy for your keeper league midfielder if you can snap him up. So I know he's someone who's available in our draft. So
I'm thinking about him quite nicely,
Well, you're going to have to take him at pick one, I reckon, Kaes. So.
No.
No, I don't know who. Like, I haven't actually had a good look at. I haven't really ranked who's going to go in the
Matt
first
Rouse
round.
picked 1, by the way.
I know that. So, Kaes has got Rao in our draft. So I've got pick 4. So I'm just trying to having a look at where I think people are going to go. So I don't want to give too much away because I know our league will be listening and someone will try to screw me over just by taking who I want just before me. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
That,
no, yes, you would. Moving on, Charlie Dixon. He was on fire again. So he had 62 from 63% time on ground, going at 0.8 points per minute. Look, he injured his groin and didn't take part in most of the second half, but I think it was more precautionary as well. He should be right for round 1. I've got a good feeling about him this year. A couple of years ago, 2017, when Port made the finals, he was absolutely immense because he was taking marks, he was kicking goals, which is unusual with Charlie Dixon, but also as well, he's a really good tackler because he's actually quite agile for a big fella. So he gets those +4s every now and then too, or then 5 because of the free kick, and then turns into, 9 on top of that? I'm not really good at maths, but 8 on top of that. So yeah, look, I think he can turn it around this year providing he stays fit.
Yeah, I think his fitness is the big key. I think he came out in Adelaide Radio a couple of weeks ago saying like he's never actually been fitter than he is now, like no injury, he's ready to go.
No one's ever said that before.
No, well, I love to buy into this preseason hype.
It's true though. Very rarely he actually does a full preseason. Yeah. I can't actually remember the last time he's done one. Yeah.
AFL injury list has him down at 1 to 2 weeks. So, but they do believe he'll be right. So I think if he plays
1 to 2 weeks to the round 1 anyway.
So, but I reckon. If that isn't actually that bad an injury, I reckon he's good to go because he's done that full preseason, which hasn't been done for a while, apparently. And look, he's always been a pretty serviceable scorer when he's actually up and running and going. So, look, I know you don't like your key forwards, but I totally agree that he could be around that 80 average, no dramas, if he's going and Porter up and about too.
All right, last but not least, Jared Leonard. So he had 39 points from 29 minutes. So he came. This scoring came from 2 goals like really late. So yeah, that's how a big part of his scoring actually came. So he sat out the first half. So I'm not really sure if he's best 22, but just going on his history, he can actually be a pretty great fantasy scorer when he plays. He averaged 80 from 7 games last year. I don't know, guys. I just don't think he's best 22 yet.
Yeah, I'm confused about that Port Adelaide back line. Like you've got even you guys like Bonner, Leonard, Hartlett, Burton.
Yeah. That's your 4 kind of wingers and flankers there without factoring in your keys.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of guys in that who I'm not really sure where the whole mix fits. So, yes, I think someone like Leonard's a good scorer, but can you take him confidently early or mid in a draft? I'm not too sure. So I think he'll slide, but if he slides late, I think he's worth a flyer as well.
Yeah, rightio. Let's move on to West Coast versus Fremantle. Are these my notes? Your Kaes, or yours?
They are your notes.
Oh, sweet. No, I realised because Andrew Brayshaw was in this one. Cool. Let's start with Andrew Brayshaw, I reckon. I've got written here just jizz face. Look,
it's disgusting.
Well, that's all I can really think when I watched him on the weekend. Look. Do you remember last year, Kaes, when I traded Andrew Brayshaw for Gary Ablett and you were just saying how much of a horrible trade that was and Brayshaw really underperforms? What do you think about that trade now?
Has he played a good AFL game yet?
Played good preseason games.
That doesn't count. That doesn't count. Talk to me in 4 weeks and see how
I didn't even have it written down here what he actually scored on the weekend.
Talk
but
to
I know
me in 4 weeks when he's actually proved himself on a big stage.
The difference is he's now actually just playing full-time mid and it's just sweet to see. He looks like he's ready for it. Look, Freo don't fill me with like a huge amount of confidence, but look, I reckon he's going to take that next step this year.
Well, I hope he's right for you, but I'm just not sure. I just want to see it. I will say you are right if he does actually perform in the first 4 weeks of this year.
No, I agree with that, but I just think it's going to happen. Darcy Tucker. So Akers being injured, I guess, was good news for this guy. So he had a free run on the wing and he really showed what he can do. So he had 93 from 71% time on ground. Look, Ace didn't play, so he'll come back in and Akers is out for quite a while. So Darcy Tucker, I reckon, should get a run on that wing and get an opportunity to show what he can do. So another one who's available in our draft, Kaes, I'm pretty sure. So he's another one handy to pick up. I think he's listed as a forward as well, isn't he?
Mid-forward,
Get on board that. Yeah, nice. But yeah, do you have any other opinion on him, Kaes?
He had some really good scores early last year when he was playing that tagging role, had a couple tons, and as he went undrafted, everyone was like, where'd this kind of come from? But yeah, definitely showed he was best 22 all last year at the Dockers, played a lot of footy there, and I think even in this preseason, I think there's been a bit of talk from Longmire that, they're actually really happy with what Tucker's doing and he's going to play a lot more in the midfield. So one to watch. He could be a real sneaky breakout this year, I think.
I think so too. Taylor Duman. Is it Duman or Juman? Or I don't really know how that. Every time I listen to a commentator say it, someone says it differently. So I'm just going to go Taylor Duman. Does that sound right?
Sounds good to me.
All right,
Continue.
cool. All right, 90 points running out of defence. So he actually looks like a fantasy scorer to me. I've said this for about 3 years running now, but he actually looks like a guy who will be a scorer coming out of defence. I'm just not sure when it's going to happen, but he is coming into his 3rd season, Kaes.
Yes.
Could be an option. Do you know what I found funny? That like a lot of people in the Keeper League Gold members group on Facebook always use Kaes' 3rd year factor as like a actual reason why you should take a guy.
It's fact.
I need to actually work out what the average jump in the player's 3rd year is and how it actually things. I'm actually going to do it one day. I'm going to sit down and scrape all the stats and work out if the 3rd year really is
Third year is the breakout year.
Anyway, Taylor Jaman, do you reckon he's worth grabbing?
Well, he's actually his 4th year hef, so he's overcooked.
That's right, because he didn't play in his first season.
But this would be his 3rd full year, which means breakout. No, he's on my watch list. He's available in our draft, and I did delist him in our other one. Over Bonner, which is it's maybe a bad call in hindsight, but these are the scores I wanted to see in the preseason. And yes, I do totally agree. He's got some fantasy game. Hopefully, that new coach just means a bit more free running, exciting footy from Fremantle, and I think that he fits that bill very, very nicely.
Last one I'm going to talk about for Freo is Lockie Schultz. He's worth mentioning just in this podcast, I think, because he's had 2 good performances in the Marsh Series. Look, he had 76 on the weekend. He'll play round 1 by the looks. Like it allows Freo to use Walters in the middle a bit more. So, look, I can't see Fremantle kicking a lot of goals this year, so therefore I can't see him scoring that well. But I think his performances have been good, and he could be a surprise package if Fremantle do pull out some better performances than we're expecting.
Do you reckon the scores will be there, the big numbers, though? Or will he just be a guy that's going to be playing most weeks?
Most weeks and probably a handy backup. But look, he's shown potential that he can score if Fremantle are on top. So that's just something you got to think about, whether you think Fremantle can actually win a few games. Yeah,
I think it was almost that Brandon Matera mould where, when they're kicking goals and playing well, he's scoring well, but when they're not, you don't really see the scores. So
he did last week play up the ground a little bit more. This week was a bit deeper, so it's hard to really see.
Oh, you definitely take a flyer on him just because there's that factor he's probably going to be playing, which is good.
Yep, I need as many players that are playing this year in my team as possible. Look, let's go to West Coast. So Liam Duggan, so he had 32 touches off a halfback flank, 124 fantasy points. So he had a good game, but he's still a little untrustworthy for mine. So last week he only had 52 from 85% time on ground. So everyone gets hyped up about this Marsh game, playing against Fremantle, who are probably a weaker opposition, but no one really thinks about what he did last week and, what he's done the last, 20 rounds before that as well. So, look, he's never averaged more than 67 in 5 seasons. So, that said, I still think he's worth picking up, but just don't expect big scores like this.
Tend to agree. I think I'd still be interested in taking him late in a draft because there is upside about it. So
he's a good streaming option too.
Yeah, for sure. It's just when you stream those kind of guys, which is a pain in the ass. But
the projections will have the best. We're releasing the projections. They'll tell you the best weeks to stream them.
Definitely worth it. But I'd take him late, but almost with no expectations, so you're kind of impressed if he does do something good. Yeah,
definitely. Let's move on to Jake Waterman. So he had 74 points. So I do like this guy. He's kind of one of my boys because he's a pretty versatile type player. This week he played forward kind of a bit more taller than he was at the end of last season. But look, sometimes he is used as like that half forward, the kind of Tom Lynch role, I call it, that kind of connector type. Also plays on a wing at time, played on a wing against Richmond last week and looked good there. So look, I don't think he's going to be a huge scorer. I think he's only good for the low 70s, maybe mid 70s if he's going really well. But I think that's good for one of your last forward spots, especially if you play 5 forwards and during the the scarcity. Someone I'd probably hope if you're going well, you don't have to actually field, but could be a handy fill-in option if you need someone.
Well, you better draft him then if he's your boy.
I don't know if he really fits my team profile.
Last pick of the draft, Jake Waterman.
Maybe, maybe the rookie draft. I've got some good forwards this year, so I'm quite happy with that. I can't actually name too many more of them apart from Andrew Brayshaw on the top of my head, but I'm sure I've got some good ones in there.
Actually in your head.
I've got some good ones in there. Nick Nat Nui, we're going to talk about next. So he had 64 from 58% time on ground. So I guess Nick Nat Nui never plays large time on ground numbers, and he had similar to last week. So don't assume he'll add more time on ground, but look, Nat Nui is like, it's a possibility he gains a bit more confidence in his body. They might start using him a little bit more. Wouldn't hold my breath, but that said, he still scores really well from low time on ground anyway. Should get around the mid 70s, low 80s kind of averages this season. So look, put him down for that. Only issue is the durability. I think we've talked about this every week for the last 3 weeks, I think. Yeah. But and you're going to have to handcuff him with a lot of dudes because it's hard to tell who's going to be the backup ruck.
Correct. Yeah, look, going to be serviceable when he plays. Is he reliable? No. But, is he worth it if you can pick him up late? For sure.
All right, let's move on to GWS versus Richmond, another one of my games. So, look, Nick Haynes is the next one I'm going to talk about. So, I said a few weeks back I wasn't confident he'd replicate last season, but I'm a lot more confident now after seeing this game on the weekend. So, if Williams stays out, which doesn't look likely, I think he's going to be back pretty early. He'll go huge, but I just don't think it's going to happen. But he just intercepts so well. He had 113 points on the weekend from a 91% disposal efficiency as well. So, a player they kind of want the ball in his hands in as well, which I don't factor in enough in those kind of thinking, I guess. So, look, he had 14 marks, which is a biggie, but he does that in regular season as well, despite this being a preseason match. I think he's going to do what he did last year now. I'm kind of confident of it.
Yeah, he's going to be a super consistent defender, which is awesome.
My worry was that he would go backwards with players like Perryman and Williams actually playing in defence and not filling in gaps in the midfield. But I still think he can score with those guys in there.
But if he's the guy that they want the ball in their hands, then that he automatically gets
one of
that
many,
spot.
But
yeah. So, but you averaged 80 last year. There's no reason he can't do that again. I don't think.
I think the same. Yeah, I think we'll get there. Sam Jacobs, he had 109 points. He played 83% time on ground too, which is good for Jacobs because he's actually quite durable in that respect. He does go all day, even though he looks like he's lumbering around most of the time. He'll likely get rested throughout the year, so you're going to have to pick up Mumford just to cover those scores when he does go out. But I reckon he's a great option if you're desperate for a ruck. Him and Nick Nui, I think, are good options if you really, really need someone. You should be able to get them quite cheap, I think.
Completely agree. If you've got no ruck going into this year, you're going to get them late. You're going to be fine.
Yep. Stop gap for a year and try to find someone later in the draft.
Yep.
Isaac Cumming. So, good surname because I think a lot of people felt that way when they watched this fantasy performance from him. So, 101 from 61% time on.
There's something about you tonight.
We're getting quite crass, aren't we? Yeah.
Andrew Brayshaw, what's going on?
Been a bit rude. What's going on? Anyway, 101 from 61% time on ground. Look, wowee. He's coming off 83 last week from 70% time on ground. We know it's a tough side to break into, but if he can, man, there's some serious potential here. This guy can score fantasy-wise.
Yeah.
I don't think his numbers were huge in the NEFL in comparison to others. I think they were quite good. I think they were around...
Yep.
I've got 70 in my head for the top, but I think it was higher than that.
I actually think his underage numbers were quite good.
Yeah, they were. I think that's why he's on the radar. And the NEFL's kind of numbers kind of weaned me off a little bit because I think it was maybe around the 90s. I can't really remember what it is. I know it wasn't as good as the Hateleys and things like that. Yeah. But yeah, look, I think if he gets a run at it, he's going to be a star. Fantasy-wise.
Yeah. And definitely... I'm just worried he's going to go earlier than he should in a draft. That's my problem.
Oh, even if he does, that's a good thing because you pick up on the value that's left behind.
That's true. But if you're keen on him, I think you might have to go earlier than you might want to.
I think so too. But it all depends on how smart the people you're drafting with.
Very true.
So
very true.
You probably I'm not that smart, so that's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, look, let's move on to Tom Green. So also solid again. He had 68 from 74% time on ground. Pretty much the same points per minute numbers last week. So I think that's what you can expect from him. Look, I think he'll get a run early. And look, even if it's not sustained, he's really worth picking up just to get him on your list because it will be a gun of the future.
Yeah, I'm trying to do my rankings for this Friday for our draft, and I've almost got him as a first round kind of a proposition. Not necessarily just for me, but I think that's where he might fly because, he's played 2 good games in the Marsh Series. There seems to be some kind of role for him, with Taranto down. Like whether it's Hateley who takes that spot, I'm not sure. But, I think if you can play early, especially in that side and score pretty well, I think that's pretty good for his credentials going forward.
I just think looking at our draft specifically, there's probably some more players that are going to be more reliable this season that you could pick up. Yeah. That's where I think he might slide a little bit, but he's probably first round potential, especially if you want to stock up on a few younger guys. He's probably a good one to go for.
Yeah.
Harry Perryman, so we know he's a gun. Look, 91 from 76% time on ground. What was interesting, and I really enjoyed this fact, that he played in defence even after the midfield injuries to players like Taranto and stuff like that. So, and Callum Ward out, and there's a whole raft of them. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Hateley in a lot more playing those midfield roles, and probably Green as well, and actually let Perryman stay on the half-back line, which is going to be really good for fantasy owners, especially in Ultimate Footy, because he's already got the back status. But hopefully in some of the classic types and the Supercoach and stuff like that, he might get it back as well. So, really encouraging signs to see him play in defence on the weekend. Hopefully that continues.
Yep, gun.
Jackson Hateley, so he's speaking of guns, here's another one. Just get on board this guy. 94 points and looked silky smooth. Kind of playing on the wing a bit more. Not as much inside numbers, but this guy can score from anywhere. Like we saw in his junior days at Central Districts, playing on a halfback flank and racking up tons in the seniors against the fully grown real men scores. Yep. So look, he could go big as well. I think he's going to have an awesome season. Get on board, Jackson Hateley. Tom Lynch, so 109 points, 4 goals. Richmond will be around the mark again this year, which means there will be goals for him to score. He came home really strong late last year, and look, mid-year and early last year, I think he really struggled due to the pre-season injuries, but this year he's had the full pre-season. At Gold Coast, he was an 80 average midfielder, and that team could barely kick a goal to save himself. Midfielder, 80 average forward, sorry, and that team could basically, they couldn't kick goals at all. Yep. So he should get to the 80s, I think, this season, which, as we talk about, we bang on about the scarcity of the forwards. I think he's going to be a great pickup. And another one, I'm breaking a lot of my key forward rules tonight.
You are.
I think I'm just realising that you're actually going to have to pick some of them up this year.
And I'm a genius.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah. No, but you're right. 2016, he averaged 86, averaging 3 goals a game. I don't think there's any reason he can't do that again this year, coming into this season fully fit. Richmond are going to be great again. I'm a big fan of Tom Lynch this year from fantasy perspective.
Yeah, same. Yeah, especially with the way he came home last year. Should be pretty handy. Look, Marlon Pickett, he looked fantastic. Still not sold. He's a huge accumulator. We talked about a couple of weeks ago about Champion Data tracking all of his games, and he's only averaged about 17 disposals a game for his career. But look, he scored 88 on the weekend, and for Pickett, I think this will be on the bigger side of his scoring. I don't think we're going to see huge scores. I don't think this is going to be the floor or anything like that. So I think 88, 90 mark is going to be his good games. But he's one of those players that has a lot of hype. So for me, another one we were just talking about this before, if he does go a bit earlier, I think this is going to be a good thing because you'll find the value elsewhere. It just leaves another guy who probably will score better for you. So look, but if he's available later on and if people aren't fooled by the hype, I think he's a good one to pick up late because he's likely going to play most weeks and he can pump out an 80 or a 90 each week just to help out your team.
Agree. I think he's a depth player in a draft league.
Yeah, definitely. Look, Daniel Rioli, he had a good game. He had 91 points, kicked 2 goals. He's not really the type of player I'd look at picking up. He's very much your kind of small, high, half forward kind of type player. And there's just too many mouths to feed in that Richmond forward line. So, look, good game, 91 points, but just here to say don't get sucked in by that one. I don't think he'll be the fantasy type really anytime soon.
Rightio, Collingwood versus St Kilda. So, kick off with John Noble. He just really impressed me on the weekend. Genuine best 22 player, and I think he could be anything this year. So, 73 points from him on the weekend. Always seems to have the ball in his hands coming out of defence. Always around the ball as well, just mopping up the interceptions and that kind of thing. And uses the ball really well. So one that just keeps going all day. I think he's going to go high in some drafts because one, he was unavailable as a mid-season pickup, but mostly because I think that a half decent back who plays each week and scores at 75-80 is pretty well respected. So I think that he could be a first round chance in our draft on the weekend. But I think you can basically lock in the fact he's best 22 at Collingwood after that game.
I was watching this game on the weekend and the commentators were talking about his junior club and they were asking, where's Plympton? And we, of course, know where Plympton is because we're South Australians, but a lot of people don't know. But speaking of Plympton, I was down that way on Saturday, and I'm getting a bit off topic here. I was down Marion Way, which is close to Plympton, and I was, doing some acting for a music video clip that's going to be coming out tomorrow, I think. So Dos from the Draft Doctors, he has recorded a film clip for one of his favourite players in the comp. I'm not going to give too much away, but look out for. Look out for that video, but look out a special acting performance from yours truly, from this guy, from me, in the film clip. So look, a bit of a collab there between the two.
Yeah. So must have been desperate.
Yeah, look, mate, my acting skills. I don't look like the greatest actor, but you'll be really surprised when you see them, I think.
Okay, I can't wait.
So anyway, look out for that one. Sorry to get off topic, but back to John Noble. Look, I've talked about him. I talked to him at the end of last year in the finals podcast. Talked about him a few weeks ago when we talked about Collingwood. I'm high on this guy. Look, I don't think he's going to be 100+ type defender, not going to be a Jake Lloyd type, but he's going to be your 70 to 80 type that can, and don't get me wrong, he will have some low scores here and there, but he's going to be one of those types that you can, chuck in your defence and he will be serviceable for your side. So I think he's going to be a good player to get.
Nice. The guy that really stood out for me though was Josh Dacos. So he was actually everywhere on the weekend. 100 points at 1.1 points per minute, 22 touches, 9 marks. And for me, I was watching that game and I just wish that was Callum Brown doing that because that's what I want Callum Brown to do. But
why don't you just take Josh Dacos?
He's actually being kept for some reason. He's on some crazily on some rookie list in our league. But
okay, that makes sense.
If he wasn't, I would be all over him because he was actually played the complete game for me. Played on the wing, through the midfield. I don't know if he's going to be best 22. Potentially with the injuries that they've got with Adams and Treloar, he might sneak into that side.
Yeah, it's a good one. I didn't factor in. Sorry, Kaes, before you did here, I talked about, I think it was Adams' injury on the weekend there and someone that could slot in. So he's actually one as well that could have a bit of a midfield bump.
Yeah, left field from there. But yeah, I think he's a genuine stash because he looked really, really good. So, as I said, I wish that was Callum Brown because then I'd be super chips in on him this year. But Dacos showed that he can play the game. Chris Mayne, super unsexy pick, I know, but he's going to be available in every draft pool, I reckon. 31 years old and no one wants him, but averaged 78 last year and had a last 5 of 92 points. Now, he's gone 113 and 98 in his 2 Marsh games and running at 1 point per minute on Sunday. Now, the Pies love him. Obviously, no Treloar and Adams, so I think he kind of just definitely slots in, not into the midfield, but genuinely cements his spot in that side as that natural leader, the experienced player there. I reckon he could even go, a second or third round pick in a keeper draft because he's going to be an 80 average player, no dramas whatsoever.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Look, you remember when they said about Chris Mayne where he signed that
worst
$1.4 million 4-year deal or whatever.
Yeah, and it was the worst ever trade ever or whatever.
Yeah, and he's just been extended on that deal.
Really?
They're not the same money, but he's had an extension a year out before his contract ends, so he's playing again next year. So that's how highly they rate him at Collingwood. So he's definitely going to play each week because he's one of their better players, I think. Or he's definitely, I don't know if he's a better player, but he's definitely integral to their side.
He's been really, really good.
Yeah. So I reckon if you're contending, you get him in your third round, it's going to be a good point scorer for your team. And these are the type of players you've got to pick up if you're gunning for a flag, I think. That's what I found when I won mine. I had to pick up so many of these types that you just don't really want to have in your side, but they're going to perform the way you need them to perform to get over the line.
Correct. Ben Long, he was really impressive too. So basically chalk and cheese from last week where he was a bit disappointing. Had lots of speed and class off the half-back line, 89 points with 24 touches. Unfortunately, there was 17 handballs in there, which we don't like to see, but can forgive him. 7 marks as well. So I think that the Saints really want to play him. There seems to be this big push externally. I think that they want Ben Long on their half-back line, but I still do have my doubts. So if he keeps those handball numbers up, that's not great for a half-back flanker. And it seems that St Kilda seem to have a million half-back flankers too. So
that's true.
It is his speed that's the big factor there, and he looked quite good on the weekend. But whether he's exactly best 22, I'm not sure. The other issue is that, not necessarily it's an issue, but he's listed as a forward in fantasy. So while he's probably going to play backlines if he does play, he's going to be a forward. So that might be handy DPP if it does come throughout the year. So if you are banking on that, it could be a chance. But whether we see these scores each week, I'm not too sure either.
Now, the next guy, is Ben Patton. I think you picked up stupidly early in the podcasters draft because I was expecting him to not be picked up at all.
What do you mean? He's a gun. He started off really well as well. He had 66 points. He was actually really in and around the game quite a lot early on. A lot of ball off that half-back line. My issue was he had a lot of bombs out of defence, which kind of just went to no one or, a big pack. And I don't know if that holds you in good stead, especially when there's lots of competition up for spots. But I think he's still handy enough. And it's tough to gauge that back, or the whole of St Kilda's best 22, I reckon. But they seem to have played him in those last 2 games, so they're obviously a bit of confidence with what he can do. We'll see how he goes. But if you can get him late, which I think I did, I didn't go early on him.
It was like pick 15, which I think
out of 20, which is fine.
It's still early. It should be the last pick.
That's rude. It's the 35th player on my list, man. That's fine.
Who did I pick up in round 15? Charlie Dixon.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I think, no, that's a good pickup. I can't even bag that. But look, I think he can be handy, even if it's just see what happens. But a late pickup, but could be handy nonetheless.
All right, keep going.
And lastly is Tim Membry. So backed up his big game from week 1 with a respectable 86. So week 1 had 138 points with 4 goals, and week 2 had 86 points with 1 goal. So took 12 marks each week, which is absolutely huge. And I think he just likes being the number 1 forward up there. So another one who's probably going to be available in lots of drafts because no one likes to keep these kind of players. But there's plenty of upside. He's only 25 too. So if he can become one of those forwards who can average, 80, 85 this year, he's almost borderline keeper. Now, that is quite crazy to say for some of those guys, but we do know that the forward pool is pretty shallow this year. He seems to be enjoying what's going on at St Kilda. They look to be improving a bit. he could be one that just comes out of left field and could be a real handy forward this year.
Another key forward I'm happy to take this year, Kaes.
Another one.
Yep, I'd definitely be happy to have him aside. Just, again, the scarcity of forwards, you got to take blokes like these. And I think as well, I know he had Bruce around him. Well, Bruce rarely played last year, but having a few players around him like, I guess, King, and then also Ryder, who will pinch up there, and then Ryan Marshall will play a bit up there too. I think it just takes a bit of heat off him as well, because he's definitely got the potential to shine. I liken him to a bit like Jay Schultz back in Port Adelaide back in the day. So not the best key forward in the league, but someone who's going to get a lot of goals and be a handy contributor to fantasy-wise, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Carlton and Brisbane, the next game that night, Charlie Cameron, he just went bananas and actually showed what he can do. So 1.4 points per minute, which is absolutely crazy, which was 144 points, kicked 5 goals too, had 21 touches and 8 tackles. Now, he was a mid-60s average, and he has been for the last 4 years, and he's actually only ever scored 3 tons, which I kind of found hard to believe, because I thought he'd have a few big games in there, because he has kicked a few bags. But for me, he just interests me that little bit. So we know he's a freak. Yes, I know that the good scores have never been there, but he could be a super handy late pickup late, because you know that he is probably going to score against the weaker teams because he's going to kick those goals. And if you know that you can bank on someone who's going to get you an 80 at least, when you stream him in for a particular game, I think that's a nice little pickup. And people kind of have those players that they don't go near because their numbers don't kind of add up to what they should be. But I reckon CC could be very handy this year.
All right. Look, someone those small forward types, but like he's looking pretty handy. I think he's just going to kick a lot of goals this year. I think that's just going to boost his scoring up, I think, naturally. Yeah. So, if he can get dangerous and kick, 2 or 3 goals a game, I reckon he's going to be viable, yeah.
Zach Bailey, I think he really cemented his spot for round 1. Really impressed with his game on the weekend. Wing or halfback flank, this kid can play. Had 64 points at 0.8 points per minute. I really liked his dash and drive, and I think the Lions look really good with him in their side. A lot of upside with him, especially on a wing. There probably might be a bit of a squeeze in terms of who plays in that wing halfback role for the Lions, but I think he was really impressive on the weekend. He's a back centre in Ultimate Footy. I think he might be one who could just really trend upwards this year.
Yeah, look, I think he's a really good player, and I think he's cemented his spot in the best 22. I'm not sure where I sit fantasy-wise, but I think over time he will progress, and I guess that's the point of the keeper league, isn't it?
It is, Hef.
All right.
Grant Birchall, speaking of keeper leagues, probably one that hasn't been kept. Another old guy, yes, I know, but his numbers were too good to not talk about tonight. So he had 70 points at 0.9 points per minute, 15 touches, which included 11 kicks and a goal. Now, I know I talked about him, I think it was late last year, about what he can actually do when he's fit. He's got all the ability, just needed that preseason to get fit here. Now, he's going to be a smoky, because there's going to be people who will just go, nah, too old, don't want a piece of him. But when he's at his best and fit, he's a genuinely good 80 average back. Now, I kind of think he might be around that best 22 mark at the Lions, but as I said, I don't think he's going to go super early or even at all in some drafts because of his injury history. But if you can get him really late in the draft, I think he could be a very, very nice smoky.
Yeah, I seem to remember him getting injured on the weekend. Did he hurt himself or something?
I don't think so.
I think his hand. He came off with a hand. I remember him on the bench holding his hand, but I think he might have come back on.
Too many
after
touches.
No, he actually just copped something. So I was a bit concerned with that, but I think he actually did play out the game by the look of his score. So look, he could be all right. But yeah, I think another one, if you're gunning for a flag, a good one to pick up to have in your defence.
Yeah. Will Setterfield, he disappointed me greatly last year, but actually impressed me on the weekend. Now, he seemed to be everywhere around the ground, which is very unlike him. His disposal does let him down a touch, but I do think he's basically penciled himself into round 1. So the pressure's on for guys like him. He needs to deliver. Was only a 67 average last year. Is a mid only in 2020, which makes him a bit of a risky proposition. Could even be around in a few pools this year. So I think if you can get him kind of like around 3 to 4, I reckon that's a good spot for him. Had a lot of potential as a kid. Obviously had lots of injury issues coming from GWS over to Carlton. I reckon this is his year to shine. He was quite good on the weekend, and I'm quite interested to see what he can do this year. Yeah,
in the back half of last season, he went around the 70 mark. I think 70.6 from his last 10 games. So that's handy enough to have in your side, I think, as bench cover or your last forward F5 type thing. So yeah, he might play a role in some teams this year, I think.
Now, we're talking about super unsexy players, and Levi Casbolt fits that bill perfectly.
One of the grossest players out there, really.
No, not at all.
Not in terms of fantasy scoring, just looking at him play, really.
Yeah, not the nicest ball drop, yes. Yeah. But look, if you look at Carlton's list, they've got no Harry Mackay, no Charlie Curnow, which means he's going to be playing for sure up forward. Caleb Marchbank and Lockie Plowman were injured on the weekend. So really your only tools are like Tom de Koning and McLovin. So Casbolt is going to be integral to their team. He's a back forward in 2020, and I think he's that great D5, F5 swingman. So the back 7 games of last year, he really heated up and put some really, really good scores together. He had 3 90s and a ton in those last 7. Now, I took him in our last spot of the podcasters draft on Friday night. So that's the 390th player picked up in a draft, and I think that's a perfect spot to kind of pick up someone like that.
Last.
Or even earlier, but like last, because he's a back forward. You know, like we know that those swingman types can be quite handy in fantasy. He's going to be playing each week, especially because, you know, Kurnow's out injured, Mackay's still injured. You know, I think there's just a role for him each and every week, and he's proven that he can score well, pinch hit in the ruck and do everything.
And it depends what the Blues do this year with Cruiser and Pitton.
Correct.
It's Pitnet. I've been calling him Pitney like an idiot.
I thought it was Pitney.
No, it is.
French.
Well, it's supposed to be, but the commentators call him Pitnet. So
Mark Pitnet.
Yeah, Pitnet. Anyway, look, it depends what they do with their ruck setup, but he's usually good for about 10 hit outs a game, as well as a backup ruck pinch hitter type thing there as well. So, not the worst option there, Kaes.
And my last bit is just my genuine hatred of the Blues smalls. Now, they've got so many of them, and I just don't know where they fit, and I think they all just end up eating each other's scores. Now, on the weekend, you had Gibbons, Fisher, Nunes, Silvani, and Dow. Then you add in guys like Kennedy and Cunningham. So, like, where do they fit? Who's actually best 22? It's just a genuine nightmare. So if you're going into your draft this week, I'd kind of strongly suggest about forgetting about all of them, because it's just not worth the hassle. Let someone else deal with that problem. Now, they could actually all be anything, or they could all be nothing, because they've all got some talent, but at the same time, they're just basically fighting for each other for spots and for touches, and I don't like that at all. So if you're talking about who's the leader of the pack there, I think Dave Cunningham's got the most upside, and even someone like Michael Gibbons does his job week in, week out, but he's only kind of like that 65 average player. So depends what you want, but they're kind of this big clump of a void for me.
Whilst you make a good point, I think you can make the case for most sides in their small forwards. They're just not great scorers.
But there's just so many of these guys who are like just plain Jane vanilla, half-back, flankers, wingers, half-forwards. They're nothing special. They're not really, you know, they've all shown a bit of fantasy game, but at the same time, they can disappoint easily. So unless you're super keen on someone, I'd try and avoid that kind of rat pack for me.
All right, we're pushing an hour now on the podcast. We might have to get through the next few. How are we going to talk about, 9 games a week going forward, Kaes? We might have to cut this down a little bit. But anyway,
have to do 2 podcasts.
Yeah, maybe.
Part 1, part 2.
It's not a bad idea. Look, let's move on to North Melbourne versus Sydney. So, look, Curtis Taylor. Don't even know who this guy is, or didn't before the weekend, but he looked impressive. 19-year-old. He had 94 points with 2 goals, and now he's probably a chance of playing early. I just don't know how well he'll score and what the job security will be like going forward. But look, definitely for your AFL Fantasy Classic salary cap type stuff, he looks like someone who could come in and make you a bit of money early. Probably worth a late pick just because we don't know a lot about him, and showed that he can actually score okay. I just don't expect these sort of scores each week. Know anything about him, Kaes?
Nothing.
All right, let's move on. You know something about this guy, though. This is Aaron Hall. So he was playing inside mid-roll and actually looked pretty good. He had 84 from 73% time on ground, and he should be available in lots of drafts, with lots of team rightfully dropping him after last season. So another one of those players to consider if you're pushing for a flag, I think, or you just want to get some, something that could average you 80 on the field. Want to pick up for that role, I think.
Totally agree. I think he could be a real bargain if he gets a few games this year. Like, he obviously had some issues last year, but we know how well he can score when he's on his game. I reckon you could get him for a steal, and he could provide some goods.
Moving on to some Sydney players here. So James Rowbottom, one of your boys, Kaes.
My boy.
Do you own him?
I took him first pick.
Oh, in that draft. But what about our home league?
No, I don't. I wish I did. Okay. I tried everything for him, but it was a non-sellable item apparently.
Damn, but he's such a gun. So he played in the midfield and only had 15 touches on the weekend, but 9 tackles and kicked the goal. So that bumps that scoring back up there. Look, as a forward, I think he's a must-have, because in a few years, I reckon he is going to be an absolute fantasy jet going forward. What did he score on the weekend? I don't have it written here. It was 85, that's right. So, yeah, look, really handy. I think he's listed as a forward as well, so won't be long before he's a midfield only.
Probably
but
not.
Yeah, he's
Stick
going to be
with
handy
him because he's going to be a jet.
Yep. All right, and last player for Sydney was Lewis Taylor. So I just got here that he didn't look shit, which is unusual. So look, noticeably he was playing on the wing. So he played this position in the EFL late last year, and he's listed as a centre only. So that kind of backs this up. So I feel like Horse is looking for a reliable winger to kind of pair with someone like Florent on the other side. So look, he could be the guy because he drafted Ryan Clark last year, and that didn't really work out for him. So hopefully Taylor makes this position his, and if he does, I know he's listed as a midfield only, but look, he could be handy just as one of your bench cover spots, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Look, if he's playing, he's probably going to be pretty serviceable. I think they've got a few players of that mould, so I just don't know where he fits. If you can take him late, I think that's probably fair play for him.
Yeah, and the job security is not really locked in or anything like that. But, why'd you take him if you're not going to play him, I guess? So, yeah.
Fair point.
Let's move on to Geelong versus Essendon quickly.
The flag favourites, the Bombers, are on fire. But we'll start off with Geelong. Quinton Narkle, the new kid in the midfield at Geelong, can seriously play. He had 86 points at 0.9 points per minute, 24 touches, unfortunately 15 handballs. Need to improve that kick-to-handball ratio, Quinton. But Gaz looked gone. He hardly scored at all on the weekend.
Cooked.
And I think that guys like Narkle and Parfitt are the guys that are going to go through the midfield mainly this year. And Narkle actually had the most centre bounce attendances of anyone in that game.
I did see
on
that.
the weekend. So I think Narkle's probably the better player than Parfitt. So grab him if you can and sit back and enjoy, because the guy has genuine talent and can score fantasy-wise too.
I just looked up to see if he's available in our draft, but of course the one Geelong supporter in our league has got him. So
of course he's not.
I reckon that team is just full of Geelong players.
When you stockpile every Geelong player, of course he's not going to.
Doesn't really know anything about any other player apart from Geelong players.
There is one guy who's available, and it's Brian Myers though, and he's got to be a guy that you target. So he was solid last week and backed it up again this week. Played a bit more forward on the weekend, which is probably where he's going to sit this year. Can pinch hit in the guts on as well if he needs to, which is good for you. But had 3 goals, 16 touches and 77 points. Now, I think that's just a really, really solid score for him, pretty consistent. He can go bigger, especially if he gets that chance to run through the midfield, but always seems around the mark and get those 20 touches quite easy, kick a few snags. I've talked about his actual childhood fantasy pedigree. If the Cats give him the keys to the midfield at all, he's going to go bananas. But as a forward this year, he's someone you want to take early, I think.
And I know how keen you are on this guy. He's available in our draft, so I might have to take to dangle the carrot in front of you, Kaes.
You
just
may.
get a few trades this way. But no, look, I don't think he's going to get that midfield time that you kind of keep talking about. I think he's solely going to play it forward, but he'll average in the mid-70s, maybe low 80s in his prime one day. But that's handy enough for my team, so yeah, I'll be looking at him.
Zach Tui, the last one for the Cats. I think he's back. He looked pretty good on the weekend. I know he's 30 years old, but he actually had a full preseason this year. Last year, which was his worst year for quite a while, I think he averaged 68 there. Really dropped off with the injury coming into that year. He had 80 and 85 averages in his last 2 seasons, and I think he could get back to that in 2020. Went at 1.1 points per minute and really used it quite nicely for his 97 points. Now, I did kind of write him off last year, but I think that was basically came down to purely a fitness thing. He's fit this year. Definitely got a spot in that Geelong back line, especially while someone like Jordan Clark continues to develop. And I think he's going to be available in a few drafts. And as a backman who can probably push that 80 again, I think he could be a very, very handy acquisition to your side.
Yeah, I just don't know where I sit with him, because at stages last year he kind of looked like he might be on his last legs and could battle to find himself to get back in the side. So hopefully that changes this year. I'm just a bit worried that he might be one of those older guys who is forced out by season's end, which could be catastrophic if you need him for a grand final or something like that. So.
Yeah, I still think there's still plenty of life left in him. If he's only 30, he's not like completely written off for me. Like, that's still young enough to.
By the end of last season he just wasn't looking like he was up to scratch as much.
He's fit. He's ready to go. Hef.
I hope so. Let's move on to some players.
Speaking of guys who are ready to go, hello, Tom Cutler. He's arrived, ladies and gentlemen. Played the last half in the 2s before backing up for the first half in the 1s.
Why was he playing in the 2s if he's going to be playing in the 1s?
Because he wanted to share the love between both Essendon VFL and Essendon AFL. Like, he's a man of the people.
Oh, God.
Anyway, but he dominated when he came and played the 1s. 45 points at 0.9 points per minute. So much run, drive and carry. Had 8 kicks, 5 marks at 82% disposal efficiency. Lock him in. Genuine scorer. Gets his chance at the Dons. He's going to play round 1, and it's going to be Tom Cutler's season.
I'll ask the question again. If he's a lock for round 1, he's going to be gunned. Why is he playing in the 2s? on the same day that he's going to be running around.
I don't know what, maybe it was a fitness thing. Maybe it was like, Why
didn't he just play a full game in the ones?
Because he's too good, and Essendon and Ben Rutten are big on fantasy, and they want him to kind of slide in drafts.
You've got to admit that's concerning, right?
It is weird, but he took his opportunity and took it. I think Tim Watson said that he's going to be an absolute jet at Essendon.
Oh, I hope you're right. But I think his points per minute scoring on the weekend was great because he only played a half. I guess he is an impressive score, but I just find that weird he was playing in the twos.
All right, Tom Cutler round 1, he's playing. Lock it in.
Okay, hope so. Yep.
Just take my word. He's a gem, guys. Okay. He's an absolute gem. Mason Redmond, speaking of absolute gems, he could become 2G for P. Hef. What do you reckon?
I agree. I acquired him in the offseason.
Class, poise, composure.
I've got him in both of our leagues now, I just realised.
Had 80 points at 1.1 per minute. 10 kicks, 5 handballs, 6 tackles. Just looks a complete package. Very classy out there. You've got your speed of Sada, McKenna. Redmond just kind of adds that bit more, not one pace, but bit more football awareness, I suppose. So if you can get him now, get him before it's too late.
It's too late, Kaes.
It's not too late.
No, I've got him. Yeah. I've got him in both
I know you
leagues.
do. I'm talking about the listeners.
Yeah, but it's too late for you, I'm saying.
Not everyone cares about what's happening in your life. This is the show for the people.
It's too late, mate. You can't get him.
I won't get him.
No, sorry. I just want to kind of chime in.
Rub it in.
No, I do think he's going to be a gun. Like, he just looks like the fantasy type. He kind of reminds me of like Brendan Goddard. I think not like as he is right now, but an emerging kind of Brendan Goddard, the same kind of play that similar role. So pretty happy that I got him for trading Nick Nat Nui for him to a guy who was desperate for a ruck. So good get.
What works. And lastly, speaking of rucks, Andrew Phillips. I think he's going to be the number 1 ruckman at the Dons this year. Belcho just can't get his body right, and Phillips is more than handy around the ground. Scored 66 points with 14 touches and 17 hit-outs on the weekend. He's proven that he can score when he's the number 1 ruckman. He did that at the Blues when Cruz was down last year. Look, he's 28, so he's not necessarily one that you can build your team around for the future, but he's still going to be handy enough for a few years, especially while someone like Sam Draper develops at Essendon. So if you want the cover, I think he's going to be one that you can get for cheap, and should be quite a decent scorer this year.
Yep, I reckon you're the same. I think the same. I think he'll go around the 80 mark this season if he plays consistently, and then I think he'll hand the baton over to Draper either late this year or at the end of next year. I think Draper's the kind of number 1 going forward for. So if you're drafting Phillips, make sure you grab Draper as well, I think. And if you do grab Phillips, then there's not going to be many people interested in Draper, I don't think, as well. So grab him late if you can, but I think that's a pretty good handcuff option. I know there's Bell Chambers in there, but I don't really see him playing that much anymore, do you?
I do not.
No, I think Phillips is going to be handier.
Agreed.
All right, that's the round rewind, Kaes. Are you going to stick around for the questions? And
I am cooked, unfortunately.
Cooked. All right, I will continue on
I'll
solo.
leave the pod in your capable hands if that's okay.
No worries, mate. I'll jump into the membership quickly and then you can take off. So, look, membership still going around. Just because the preseason is over doesn't mean it kind of ends. It doesn't mean it's going to be no use for you going forward. So this week, Friday, 2 more days from now, we're going to release the projections. So they're going to be updated weekly. So throughout the season, you're going to be able to use these projections to find your captains or find your streamers or find your waiver wire options and all stuff like that. Also, things that are going to be updated weekly are your State League fantasy scores, so you can check out how your players are scoring in the twos, whether they look like playing anytime soon. And the breakout tracker is another thing that's going to update every week in season. Well, we hope it does. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to. But look, that's going to update every season. So as opposed to last year, we only released it at the start of the year and mid-season. Now we're going to update it every week so you can track how all the young players and people that haven't played 100 games yet compare to the best players in the competition. And that'll rotate as well. So it'll measure it against the best players current in the game, and that'll keep chopping and changing as well so you get a more accurate reading. So should be a pretty handy resource this year. So if you're not on there, you're going to need that, because otherwise people are going to take all the breakout contenders off the waiver wire before you get to them. So make sure you're on top of that. Each week we read out some gold members that have signed up. We read 5 out each week because we just got too many to do in one hit. So this week we've got Harley Philp, Henry King, Damian Clemens, Michael Boland, and Roy Davey from Destroy from the Traders Podcast, AFL Fantasy official DT Talk. So again, the pros are signing up, so must be doing good things, Kaes. All the join links are in the description. So, just scroll down, have a look at those if you're keen to sign up. Last thing before we move on to the listener questions, and I do them solo, is the podcast reviews. You got one last review in your case?
I do. I'll go for it. So It's from Hatch244. Best AFL fantasy pod. Thanks, mate. Just took over 2 keeper teams this season and was heading in blind as I've never done it before. One team I picked up finished last and was old as the hills age-wise. Love how you mentioned the young guys and quietly heard of guys who can keep rebuilding a team. It's definitely helped me so far. Also love the classic banter. I have a good laugh while listening. Keep up the good work, boys. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Hatch244. Now, again, we say this every week, but we actually mean it. That's our last review. So we need someone to write in this week to write one so we can read it next week. So please, because we're running low. And, if you haven't done it yet or you're enjoying the pod and you do use Apple Podcasts, maybe just think about doing a review so we can read it out in the podcast. Otherwise, we'll skip this section next week. All right, Kaes, thanks for joining us tonight. Big effort for you to actually get here and get it done. I'll finish off the podcast with the listener questions, and you only get my opinion tonight, listeners, but lucky it's the best opinion anyway, so it's fine.
Sorry, listeners. I hope no one else gets an ear infection from listening to Hef's dribble.
Yeah, well, it could happen, actually. All right, let's move on to the listener questions. See you later, Kaes.
Bye.
All right, Hef flying solo here. I've just cracked myself another Remedy passion fruit kombucha, and I'm going to get stuck into some of the listener questions. Big effort by Kaes to actually get here and do that with the ear problem. So good on him for doing that. It's disappointing he can't stick around for the rest, but completely understand. So let's get stuck into the questions. So Paul Vincent, he asks, who do you prefer, Riley O'Brien or Rowan Marshall? Look, I personally prefer Riley O'Brien despite the poor showing on the weekend. Kaes has written here in the show doc he prefers Marshall just because he reckons Ryder isn't going to stick around that long. Marshall will be better going forward. I just think last year that the Saints weren't super happy or didn't seem super happy with his ruck work, and I think that's why they've got Ryder, is to kind of find some sort of replacement or some sort of chop out that's going to be better in the taps and things like that. So I guess we'll see how it pans out. I know Marshall was great around the ground, but I just don't think they're super happy with his ruck work, but we'll have to wait and see. I could be wrong on that too. It could be different under a new coach as well. There might be different standards or might be different belief in him, but just something to think about. I reckon Riley O'Brien's a better get. Kaes reckons Rowan Marshall, so go figure. Just flip a coin and hopefully it comes up okay. Look, Chris Collin, he asks, who do you believe are the top 5 players from the most recent draft who will be long-term Supercoach must-haves? Now, look, I don't play Supercoach, so I can't really give you too much info, but just looking at some of the Supercoach numbers from the juniors, like Matthew Rao, I think is going to be up there. Luke Jackson as a ruckman, I think he will pull some Supercoach numbers the long term. Tom Green looks like a jet all class, so he'll be up there too. Look, Devon Robertson, I know there's always talk about, well, I always heard there was talk about his disposal and things like that, but looking at his junior numbers as well, awesome Supercoach numbers. Blokes like Hayden Young are going to be all class. Caleb Sarong too. I think Hayden Young in particular for Supercoach more so than AFL Fantasy, because I reckon he's a quality over quantity type. I reckon some of those players would be some of the better Supercoach must-haves going forward. Next question, the Tapsman. So how many sons is too many sons? So Brodie, Ainsworth, McPherson, Greenwood, Weller, Took, Rao, etc. All outstanding pre-seasons, but what happens from here? They can't all average 85, can they? Look, I reckon it's probably a bit too many, but that said, I don't know who you get rid of. I would be happy to offload Took, Miller, I reckon. And just looking at the rest, look, Brodie, Will Brodie, is he best 22? Is he not best 22? Does he have a decent fantasy scoring role in the side? I know he was good at the end of last season. I think without injury, he would have been fine. He's one I'd consider trading that the price is right. Same with Took Miller. I just don't see where he fits in the big scheme of the Gold Coast midfield and how strong it's getting with all the kids. Plus, he tags a little bit and can get stuck up forward too. So if you need to get rid of any, I reckon you'd probably consider getting rid of Will Brodie and getting rid of Took, because you should be able to get something pretty decent for Will Brodie. And Took Miller, Miller. I just don't know if he can just maintain the scoring with all these kids coming through in the midfield. That's all. At Jamie Mott, so looking to pick up a speculative free agent from the pool in a 10-team league. Lukosius, Perryman, Battle, Chera, Rowbottom, Marshall are all not drafted. Is there anyone that jumps out to you that will break out this year, or is it a year too early? Keep up the good work, guys. Mate, there are so many breakout candidates in there. I reckon Perryman for mine would be my go-to because I'm confident that he's going to keep that back status going forward because I think he'll play in defence slot this year. Kaes is pretty keen on Rowbottom, but that's his boy. I don't mind Rowbottom. I just think without forward status, he just becomes that little bit less valuable as, say, someone like Perryman. So that's someone I would go from there. I'm just going to pause for a quick refreshment. Just give me a second. Doing a lot of talking by myself here with no one to give me a chop out. It's a bit difficult, but we'll move on to the next question from at TWR412. So, would you think with 15 keepers that keeping 4 Suns is too bold? And I say absolutely not to that. Look, I kept 5 Port Adelaide players when I was in a 16-keeper team and won the flag with those. So my 5 were Wines, Boak, Westhoff, Pittard and Ryder were my 5 keepers there. So, look, I think you can, as long as they score well and they don't kind of eat into each other's scoring too much, like they play in different areas. So some are forwards, some are defenders, some are midfielders. I don't think it's too much because I think they can all score together. You got to worry if you've got, say, all 5 of them in the same midfield. That'll probably hurt you. But I think if they're split up a little bit, they'll be fine. Lockie Byrne. So Will Brodie done enough to get that on-ball roll? Look, I didn't see the game because I thought the AFL thought it was a good idea to start a game at 4:30. But look, sounds like he went okay. Has he done enough? It's really hard to tell with all those young midfielders coming in. I think, though, he will play early just by the look of him. I think his efficiency was actually quite good on the weekend as well. Don't quote me on that because I can't quite remember, but I can't remember the numbers specifically. Actually, I can look them up right now. Let's have a look with Will Brodie. Win at 84%. So a big thing, 78%. With Will Brodie, I think in the past, he kind of burnt the ball a lot more and didn't really have much of a contested game as much. So I think he's kind of worked on those things quite well. I think he's fought enough to work his way to the side, yeah. So I reckon he should have some sort of a role. But I think he's a type of player, as soon as something goes pear-shaped, Stewie Jew will be pretty hard on him. We're seeing he's a bit harder on Fiorini as well. So, look, monitor that one. But I think for now, he's probably in the best 22. Ross Taylor, so your top 3 breakout players. So for mine, I think Andrew Brayshaw is right up there. Dan Houston, I'll probably have Dan Houston 1 actually, and then Brayshaw after that. And on top of that, I think Jackson Haitley from there. I think he's going to have a big season, and I'm really confident that GWS are going to not bring those midfielders into the midfield. Not bring those defenders into the midfield like they did last year, and they're going to play blokes like Haitley and play blokes like Green and give them a run through the guts, because I think that's what they desperately need, is just a bit of a injection of youth. So I think that and that kind of thing will get them to the next level, I think. So I think those 3 there, Houston, Brayshaw and Jackson Haitley, are going to be the top 3 breakout players. And Jaden Short, I think, is going to be one that's very, very close as well. Just couldn't fit in my top 3. Greg Mays, he asks, which first and second year under the radar players have impressed you this season? And could it be worth a speculative bench position in a long-term keeper league? So under the radar, I think so. Guys that aren't, everyone's talking about on the Keeper League channels going around. I think second-year players for mine would be Taron Thomas. I think he's a bit under the radar because he's probably not going to be a huge fantasy scorer going this season, but he just looks like a fantasy type for mine. Lockie Schultz is someone that could be okay, if he develops the way I think he might. Darcy Fort as well. I know he's a mature age pickup last year, but he was doing some good things on the ruck on the weekend. I think everyone else that you talk about are kind of well and truly on the radar. So I think those guys, blokes like Rowbottom or, players like that, Jackson Haitley, they're already kind of out there. People know about those. But I think for those guys, late picks, I think they're going to be good pickups there. First year, I think someone that not many people are talking about a lot is Caleb Sarong. So I think he would be a good late pickup if you can get him as well. So, yeah, because I think he's just got good fantasy numbers, a bit of a fantasy game. Last question comes from at Russ2468. What's your favourite kombucha cocktail? So look, I tried the blood orange with gin, but I wasn't a huge fan. I don't really like alcoholic beverages apart from beer. And believe it or not, I don't drink that much beer. I might have, 3 or 4 a weekend or something like that, but I don't, go nuts on them. So it was a bit of something different to try the kombucha and gin. And I didn't love it, but Kaes reckons, garnish is a bit of a must. So you put some mint or something in that and fruit, some ice. So maybe I was just doing it wrong, just trying to drink kombucha and gin together. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I might give it another try in the coming weeks to see how it tastes. So that's a wrap. So once again, my apologies for the lateness. I think with Kaes' injury, he should know better than to get on a surfboard just before the fantasy season begins and one of the biggest podcasts of the year. But shit happens. So it's good of him to actually get up and about and come in today and get that done. Basically check us out on our socials at Keeper League Pod, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those. Check out the membership stuff if you're keen, and make sure you check out Dos from the Draft Doctors, his music video that's coming out on Thursday this week. You might see a familiar face in the film clip. So that should be pretty fun. All right, listeners, we'll be back next week. We'll talk through our Keeper League teams and then go through some projections and stuff like that for the season. And after that, we'll be in. So it's getting pretty bloody close now and getting very exciting. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.